You ever get woken up by something that doesn't just jolt you out of sleep, but rips the ground right out from under your feet? That morning, it was 6:14 a.m. when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I groaned, reached over without looking, expecting a reminder or calendar ping. But it was a voice memo from Dana, my wife. I pressed play, still half asleep. And then her voice came through, light, giggly, carefree. And yeah, I just crashed on Connor's couch. Don't freak out, okay? It's not like that. It's just, Mark never lives a little, you know? So why not? My blood turned cold. Connor, her ex. My mind didn't quite catch up to the words before my body reacted. I sat straight up in bed, the blanket falling to my waist. She hadn't even come home last night. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it echoing in the silence. I replayed it, again and again, listening for some hint that I'd misunderstood. But her voice was too clear, too relaxed. Not a drop of guilt. Just Dana being Dana. Suddenly, I wasn't in our warm, oak-floored bedroom anymore. I was floating somewhere above it, looking down at my life unraveling in real time. She was still gone. I reached over to her side, cold. I stared at the ceiling, then at the framed wedding photo on the dresser across from me. I remember that day. I'd never seen her look happier. Or maybe I just wanted to believe she looked happy. Mark never lives a little. That line clanged around in my head like a bell I couldn't unring. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. Like it was some quirky joke to share with her old flame. Like I was a punchline to a story I wasn't invited to. You know that moment when the house is still, and you realize you're the only one feeling the weight of something massive? That was me, sitting in bed, listening to my wife laugh about another man's couch. The worst part? I didn't even feel angry. Not yet. Just hollow. After a long shower I couldn't feel, I pulled on a shirt, knotted my tie like I always did, grabbed my briefcase. Everything mechanical. Familiar. I work as a tax accountant at a mid-sized firm in Silverdale, Washington. We're the kind of place with a Keurig in the corner and spreadsheets for days. For 10 years, I've been building toward partner track. Quietly, steadily. No flash, no drama, just solid work. That life used to mean something. Now, it felt like a script I was mouthing lines to. I stepped into the kitchen. The coffee was still set from the night before, my mug lined up beside the creamer she liked. That simple domestic detail hit me harder than it should have. I didn't text her, didn't call. What was I supposed to say? Hope you slept well on your ex's couch, honey? Instead, I drove to work in silence. The highway blurred past me like it was all just scenery. Because what she'd shattered wasn't just trust. It was routine. The thing that had made me feel safe. And the most twisted part? A part of me wasn't surprised. Not really. Because deep down, I think I'd felt her slipping away for months. One subtle joke too sharp. One weekend away too vague. The way she laughed harder at her phone than she ever did at anything I said. I just didn't want to admit it. Didn't want to see it. But now? Now I had no choice. And this memo, this betrayal, wasn't even the worst of it. No, that was still coming. And I had no idea just how far the crack would run. By the time I got to the office, I was already holding my breath. Not literally, but in that way you do when you know bad news is coming. Like bracing before impact. I went through the motions, logged into my terminal, smiled politely at Denise at reception, dropped my lunch in the break room fridge. Everything felt just a little too sharp, too bright. Then I made the mistake of opening my email. There it was. A message from Craig, my boss. Subject, let's catch up. Scheduling conflict today. I clicked it open. He'd regretfully pushed our quarterly review meeting to next cycle. That meeting was supposed to be the conversation. The one where we finally discussed the partner track. I'd put in the hours, the quiet overtime, the nothing left unchecked reports. It wasn't glamorous, but I was steady, reliable. And now, suddenly, postponed. Indefinitely. I leaned back in my chair, trying not to let the heat rush to my face. Across the room, Jared and Lauren were laughing about something, and the sound grated against my skin. I checked my phone. Not for Dana, just out of reflex. But the universe doesn't believe in mercy. There, right at the top of my feed, was her latest update. A carousel of sunny photos. A rooftop gathering, all warm string lights and red solo cups. Dana front and center, arm slung casually over Connor's shoulder, sunglasses in her hair. Her smile wide. Her cheeks pink. That familiar tank top she only wore when she felt free. Caption, good vibes only. Just like old times. I stared at it for a full minute, unable to look away. Not one trace of me in those shots. Not even a mention. Not even a nod to the life she was supposedly coming back to. I swiped through, laughing faces I didn't recognize anymore, beer cans and blurry toasts. Her dancing barefoot on some stranger's porch, hair loose, head thrown back. And somewhere between the third and fourth photo, something snapped. I wasn't angry, not really. Anger would have felt useful. What I felt was worse, like I didn't exist. Like she'd already rewritten the narrative. Edited me out clean. And that invisible feeling? It bled into everything. I stared at my screen for God knows how long. My report cursor blinking, numbers half finished. The rhythm I usually had gone. Just like that. Sometime after lunch, Craig walked past and glanced at my desk. "You okay, Mark?" I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just zoning a little." He paused, lips pursed. "Try not to zone too long. We've got Q2 breathing down our neck." I smiled, just enough to keep things polite. But inside, I felt gutted. Because I knew what he didn't say. In this office, being dependable was currency. And right now, I was hemorrhaging it. By 3:45, I still hadn't fixed the column errors in the F&B file. I knew it. And worse, I didn't care. The photos kept flashing through my mind. That version of Dana, unburdened, uninhibited, completely untouched by consequences. And me? Sitting in a cubicle with stale coffee and a wrinkled button-up, trying to remember which formula flagged inventory shifts. I packed up 10 minutes early and headed for the parking lot without saying goodbye. The sky outside was gray, the kind that can't decide whether to rain or not. I stood by my car for a moment, keys in hand, heart beating too fast for someone who'd only scrolled a few photos and missed a meeting. But here's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes it posts a photo where you don't exist. I didn't go home that night. I told Dana I had a late client meeting, which wasn't a total lie. The meeting had been canceled last minute, but I let her think I was still stuck in a conference room downtown. Truth is, I sat in my car for almost an hour, just watching the slow trickle of people walk their dogs through the park near Eaton and 6th. That little triangle of green was the first place we'd kissed. That memory used to comfort me. Now it just felt like someone else's life. Somewhere in the fog of my scrolling and half-hearted attempts at distraction, a flyer popped up in the community group thread. Neighborhood cleanup this Saturday. Volunteers needed. Gloves provided. Coffee and donuts after. It wasn't much, but something about it stuck. Maybe because it sounded simple, purposeful, and maybe I just needed to be around people who weren't pretending everything was fine. Saturday came. I showed up just after 9, wore an old hoodie, and hoped no one would make small talk. The park wasn't big, just a few cracked sidewalks and some neglected beds of mulch. But the group was already there. Half a dozen faces, scattered in pairs with trash bags and rakes. That's when I saw her. She wasn't doing anything dramatic, just tying a plastic bag to the end of a rusted-out trash bin. But something about her moved in rhythm with the morning. Like she belonged here, in the air and the light and the work. Her name was Allison, and she smiled like she meant it. "Gloves are in the box," she said, nodding toward a stack of supplies. Her eyes didn't linger too long, didn't scan for judgment. Just a soft acknowledgement, like she already knew I wasn't here for the donuts. "Thanks," I said, reaching for a pair. "You a regular?" I shook my head. "First time. Figured I'd try something different." "Well, welcome to dirt therapy," she said with a grin, picking up a rake. Nothing heals the soul like soggy leaves and mystery wrappers. That made me laugh. Genuinely. It had been a while. I kept my head down most of the time, working quietly along the flower beds. But every now and then, I caught glimpses of her, talking to an older man who kept cracking dad jokes, helping a young girl untangle her hair from the bristles of a push broom. She was kind in a way that wasn't performative, like it wasn't for anyone's benefit but her own soul. After 2 hours, we all gathered under the awning by the community center. Someone handed out coffee. A teenager passed around powdered donuts. Allison sat next to me on the stone bench and offered me one without looking. "I don't know what brought you here," she said, brushing a bit of soil from her pants, "but I'm glad you came." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I watched the steam curl from the top of my cup and asked quietly, "Do you ever feel like you're awake inside someone else's life?" Her smile faded, but not because she was uncomfortable. If anything, her eyes softened. All the time, she said, usually around 3 in the morning. That was the first moment I let my guard down with a stranger in years. She told me she taught 5th grade, English and art, said she used to be married but didn't offer more, and I didn't pry. She had this way of speaking that made silence feel like part of the conversation. I didn't mention Dana, didn't talk about exes or couches or rooftop photos, but something in my posture must have told her I was carrying weight, because as she stood to leave, she touched my elbow gently. "If you ever need to talk," she said, reaching into her coat pocket and pulling out a business card. "My friend Lydia is a therapist. She offers free consults for first-timers. And she's good. No clipboards. Just clarity." She smiled again, smaller this time, like she understood she'd just crossed a line most people avoid. But I didn't stop her, because in that quiet, crumpled park on a Saturday morning, a stranger's kindness reached into a part of me I didn't know had gone numb. And it made me wonder, what if numb wasn't safe anymore? What if it was the most dangerous place I could be? I stared at Lydia's card for 3 full days, kept it in the breast pocket of my blazer, right where I usually clipped my ID badge. I'd run my thumb over the embossed letters whenever I reached in for a pen. Lydia Rowe, LMFD. Empathetic, honest, direct. 3 words that made me want to bolt and walk through the door at the same time. It wasn't that I didn't believe in therapy. I just didn't believe it worked for people like me, the quiet ones. The ones who didn't explode, just eroded slowly. But on Wednesday, something shifted. I got home late after another sluggish day at work. Dana was already asleep on the couch, the TV casting blue shadows across her face. Her phone was still unlocked, lying carelessly on the armrest. That's what did it. Not the messages, I didn't snoop. It was the casualness, the comfort, the way she could fall asleep like the world wasn't cracking beneath us. That night, I sent Lydia an email. Just one line. "If you're still offering free consults, I think I could use one." She responded within the hour. "Come by Friday at 5. No pressure, no paperwork. Just 2 humans talking." I almost canceled 3 times. But something pulled me forward, curiosity, maybe. Or the fact that I couldn't remember the last time someone asked me how I was and meant it. Her office was tucked between a bakery and a dry cleaner, nothing clinical about it. No white walls or sterile couches. Just a soft gray love seat, a salt lamp in the corner, and jazz playing low from a speaker hidden somewhere. Lydia looked exactly how I hoped a therapist would. Not too polished, not too messy. Her sweater sleeves were pushed up like she wasn't afraid of hard work. She greeted me with a warm smile that didn't try too hard. "I'm glad you came, Mark." I sat down slowly, hands folded like I was waiting for an interview. She didn't ask for a life story, just said, "What's been heavy lately?" And somehow, those words cracked me open. I didn't tell her everything, just pieces. The voice memo, the couch, the laugh that haunted me more than the betrayal itself. I didn't cry, but I spoke slower than usual, like each word had to be fished out from deep water. Lydia didn't interrupt once. No notepad, no checkboxes, just that same steady expression that didn't flinch, even when I admitted something I hadn't told anyone. I keep wondering if this whole marriage is just inertia, like we stopped steering years ago. Her silence in that moment didn't feel awkward. It felt like space, like she was letting my words land before asking me where I wanted to go next. "I'm not here to push," she said, "just to help you see what's true, without the noise." That line stayed with me, because that's what betrayal does. It buries the truth under so much noise. You forget what your own voice sounds like. And sitting there, for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally hearing mine again, even if it was just a whisper. It took me a full week to bring it up. Every night, I rehearsed the conversation while brushing my teeth, standing in front of the mirror pretending I was braver than I felt. And then, on a quiet Tuesday evening, while Dana sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through a basket of mismatched socks, I finally said it. "I've been seeing someone." She didn't even look up. "Is this about Allison?" "No," I said. "A therapist. Lydia." That made her pause. She glanced up, brows raised. Not defensive, just curious. Oh, I waited. Expected the usual deflection, the sarcasm she'd sharpened over the years. But she only said, "Okay," and turned her attention back to the socks. I watched her in silence for a moment, then added, I think it might help if you came. Just once. She let the sock drop, slow and deliberate. Like couples therapy? I nodded. We don't have to fix everything. I exhaled. I want to hear you. Really hear you. Without all the noise. She stared at me for a long moment, like she was trying to figure out what I wasn't saying. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. I've been feeling like I live next to you. Not with you. Her voice wasn't cold. It was the kind of voice people use when they're so tired, they can't even cry anymore. Maybe we both stopped showing up a while ago, she added. Maybe we got good at routines and bad at being people. I sat down across from her, the laundry basket between us. Would you come? She looked at me, not through me, at me, and then she nodded. I'll come. We didn't hug. We didn't fall into some sudden emotional breakthrough. But that nod? It was the first honest offering in months. The session was awkward at first. Lydia welcomed Dana gently, offered her tea, and gave us space to just breathe in the same room without walking on eggshells. For a while, Dana talked about work, her students, the stress, the way her apartment used to be cluttered with canvases before everything felt like a to-do list. Then, with her hands folded in her lap, she said softly, I miss how we used to be. Not tearful, not dramatic, just real. I miss the little things, she said, like falling asleep on the couch during movies. You making pancakes even though you always burn the first one. Us complaining about the laundry and then dancing in the hallway like idiots just to forget how tired we were. It hit me like a gut punch. Because I miss those things too. But more than that, I miss the version of us that thought love could survive on habits alone. Lydia didn't say much, just watched us like a lighthouse waiting for two boats to admit they were lost. That night, driving home, Dana didn't say a word. But when we pulled into the driveway, she reached across the gear shift and rested her hand lightly on mine. No promises, no illusions, just warmth. And I held on to that moment like it might grow into something. Something not new, but maybe worth revisiting. Our third session didn't start with anything remarkable. Dana arrived 5 minutes late, hair still damp from a rushed shower. I offered a smile. She returned one that didn't quite reach her eyes. We sat on opposite ends of the same couch this time. Still close enough to matter. Lydia asked if either of us wanted to start. We both shook our heads. So she filled the quiet with a gentle, let's try something different today. She reached for her phone, tapped a few times, and said, I use music sometimes. Helps uncover emotion that language avoids. Before I could process what that meant, the first few notes of a song poured softly through her office speakers. Dana's head snapped toward the sound, eyes wide. And I froze. I knew that melody, down to the grainy guitar strings. California Blue by Finchero. An indie band we followed like groupies back in college. It was the song that played during our first road trip together, when Dana's old Civic had no AC and a trunk full of snacks. When we got lost somewhere outside Eugene and didn't care because we had gas station coffee, an open sky, and each other. Now it felt like a ghost, rising between us. I closed my eyes for a moment, bracing. But then, Dana laughed. Not cruelly, not with irony. It was small, surprised, like someone catching a memory midair and finding it still soft. Remember the motel with the broken heater? She said, voice almost a whisper. I cracked a smile. And the vending machine that only took exact change. Her face lit up, not the way it used to, but close enough to make my chest ache. We started trading memories like old coins, worthless on paper, but heavy in our hands. That time we made pancakes with a flat iron during a blackout. The stray cat we nearly adopted after a bottle of wine convinced us we were ready for parenthood. The grocery store karaoke night when she serenaded the frozen foods aisle. Each memory peeled back a layer of whatever distance we'd built. Each laugh felt like a fragile bridge forming between two cliffs. Even Lydia stayed quiet, letting the song fill in the gaps. For a second, just one, I let myself imagine that maybe we could go back. That under all the resentment and silence, the foundation still held. But just as quickly, the doubt slipped in. Because nostalgia has teeth. It bites down when you least expect it. As the song faded, Dana wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Not sad, just overwhelmed. I forgot we used to be fun, she said. I nodded, but something in me tightened. Because I didn't forget. I remembered it every time I passed that diner we used to love, now remodeled into a vape shop. Every time I poured cereal into the blue bowl she used to steal bites from. Every time I looked at her and saw a stranger wearing my wife's smile. Lydia cleared her throat gently. Nostalgia is powerful, she said, but it doesn't build anything by itself. It just points to what mattered. Dana glanced at me, searching. Does any of it still matter to you? I didn't know what to say. Because yes, of course it did. And no, not in the way it used to. I left that session more confused than ever. We'd laughed, shared something real, but I couldn't tell if that was a spark of hope or just the last flicker of a dying fire. It was raining the night she told me. Not the soft, movie kind of rain. This was the kind that came sideways, wind howling through the gaps in the window frames, thunder grumbling low like a warning. I had just made tea. 2 mugs, out of habit. One with honey for her, no lemon. Hers sat untouched on the table while mine went cold in my hands. Dana stood by the window, arms wrapped tight around herself like she needed a shield. There's something I should have told you earlier, she said. I didn't look up right away. I already knew the tone, that fragile tremor that always came before the next crack in the foundation. Connor and I, that night, it wasn't just crashing on his couch. Silence. Not the kind you can dismiss with a deep breath. The kind that prickles your skin, makes time feel elastic. I stayed still, let the words fall like hail. We kissed, she continued. I don't know why I didn't say it before. I guess I thought if I left that part out, it wouldn't be so final. A kiss. Just a kiss. Like that was supposed to soften the impact. But it didn't land the way she thought it would. It didn't explode. It didn't shatter glass. It just settled. Like a bitter truth that had always been hovering above, waiting for its cue to descend. I met her gaze finally. Her eyes were wide, guilty, searching. But I wasn't angry. I was tired. Was it planned? I asked, my voice too steady for what I felt. No, she said quickly. It just happened. We were talking. About college, old memories, how simple everything felt back then. I got caught up in it. And then what? She shook her head. Fast. That's it. We kissed. Once. I pulled away. I slept on the couch. I didn't respond. Just let her words settle over me like fresh dust on an already abandoned shelf. Dana stepped closer, the air between us thick with something unspoken. I needed to say it. I couldn't keep letting you think you had the full truth when you didn't. I'm not asking for anything. I didn't want to lie anymore. I nodded slowly, more to myself than to her. Because this wasn't about truth. Not really. It was about timing. About the fact that she only told me now, weeks later, after therapy sessions and half-rekindled memories. A kiss isn't nothing. But it's not everything either. And that's what made it worse. It lived in the gray. Not betrayal by body, but betrayal by choice. By nostalgia. By the decision to not come home that night and tell me the full truth. To let me sleep beside her while she carried someone else's lips like a secret. After a while, she sat down. Not too close. Just near enough for me to hear her breathing. I thought about not telling you, she admitted. But that didn't feel fair. I looked down at my tea. Still untouched. Still warm enough to burn if I dared a sip. Thanks for telling me, I said, but the words tasted hollow. Because I didn't know what they meant. Did they mean I forgave her? Did they mean I'd stop trying to? Or did they just mean we were out of new things to break? That night, we didn't fight. We didn't slam doors or cry or accuse. We just sat. Quiet. Sober. Strangers with shared history. And I couldn't help but wonder, was this what honesty looked like between two people trying not to hate each other? Or was this just the final form of denial? It came on a Sunday, late morning. I'd just come back from a jog that turned into more of a slow shuffle down the trail behind our place. My thoughts were tangled, and every step felt like I was trying to outpace something I couldn't quite name. Dana was in the kitchen, oddly composed. No music, no clatter of pans. Just her at the counter, pen in hand, scribbling on a piece of thick cream stationery. I froze in the doorway. You writing a letter? She looked up, caught a breath in her chest, then nodded. To your parents. I blinked. Why? Dana sat back, her face open in a way I hadn't seen in months. Not guarded, not rehearsed, just vulnerable. Because they've always treated me like family, even when I didn't deserve it. She turned the paper toward me, sliding it across the countertop. I didn't reach for it right away. Did something happen? She nodded. I told Connor not to contact me again. I deleted everything. Our thread. Old photos. Even the playlist we made in college. There was something achingly sincere in how she said it, not as a performance, but like she was finally letting go of a version of herself that no longer fit. And the letter? I asked. Dana's voice wavered. It's not about saving face. I just need them to know I know what I cost. I finally picked up the letter. Read it silently while she watched, fingers fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. Dear James and Loretta, I won't pretend to deserve your kindness. I'm writing this because I made a decision that hurt your son, and, by extension, you. You've always welcomed me with more warmth than I knew how to ask for. You made me feel like I belonged, even when I wasn't sure I did. Sunday dinners. Late calls for recipes. The quilt Loretta made for our first anniversary. I still keep it folded at the foot of the bed. Please know that my choices weren't about malice. They were about confusion, weakness, and the misguided hope of chasing something that didn't exist anymore. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even sure I've earned the chance to apologize. But I wanted to try. Because even if Mark and I don't make it, I'll always carry gratitude for the family you were to me. Thank you for letting me be part of your lives. I'm sorry for the pain I brought into it. With respect, Dana. By the time I finished, my throat was tight. Not because the letter fixed anything, but because it acknowledged the wreckage without trying to sweep it under some rug of good intentions. I never asked you to do this, I said, setting it down carefully. I know, she replied, but it felt wrong not to. We stood in silence for a moment, neither of us sure what came next. She looked at me, really looked, and asked the one question I'd been avoiding. Do you still believe we can find a way back? I opened my mouth, then closed it again, because I didn't know the answer. Not yet. All I knew was that the woman standing in front of me wasn't the same one who left a voice memo laughing about her ex's couch. And maybe I wasn't the same man who listened to it in shock, either. Maybe we were both just people, standing in the middle of our own consequences, trying in the smallest ways to own them. Allison and I started meeting for coffee on Thursdays. It wasn't planned that way. The first time was just a hey, want to grab a cup after the cleanup kind of moment. No pressure, no expectations. She smiled when I said yes. One of those small, quiet smiles that don't try to impress you, just invite you in. We went to this place on Melrose, tucked between a used bookstore and a florist. The barista knew her order, oat milk latte, 1 pump of cinnamon, always in a to-go cup even when we stayed. I ordered whatever sounded close enough to normal. The conversation was easy, safer than it had any right to be. We didn't talk about Dana. We didn't talk about relationships, not really. She told me about her students, about the 10-year-old who brought her a deadbeat tape to a card because it's the thought that counts. I laughed harder than I meant to. She told me she hated running but loved hiking, that she once got lost on Mount Rainier for 4 hours and came back with sunburn and a renewed appreciation for phone batteries. It was all so harmless, so comfortably distant from anything that could hurt. And maybe that's why I kept showing up. But then, about 3 weeks in, I noticed something. I had started checking my phone less during our meetups, not because I wanted to be present, but because I didn't want Dana to ask questions if she ever saw a text come in. I caught myself shaving more carefully that morning, choosing a shirt that fit a little better, smelling the collar to make sure it was fresh. That old, too familiar voice in my head whispered, "This is how it started last time." With little things. Casual laughter that turns into subtle avoidance. Conversations you replay in your head for too long. And the worst part? Allison noticed. One afternoon, she looked up from her drink and asked softly, "Do you feel like you're doing something wrong?" I froze. "What do you mean?" She stirred her coffee slowly. "You've been quieter lately. More careful. Like you're waiting for a verdict." I exhaled. "I think I'm trying not to mess this up." She tilted her head, eyes kind but sharp. "Mark, this isn't anything to mess up. We're just two people having coffee." I nodded, but my chest felt tight. Because it wasn't just coffee, not for me. It was a mirror, one I hadn't expected to face. Sitting across from Allison, hearing her laugh, watching her think out loud, I started to realize I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at a chance to escape something I hadn't fully unpacked. And that's when it hit me. I was recreating the same drift that had gutted me. Dana hadn't cheated with a stranger. She'd gotten lost in something familiar. Nostalgia, simplicity, emotional safety, the ache of what used to be. And here I was, doing the same. Choosing ease over clarity, distraction over decision. That night, I sat alone in my car outside my apartment, the radio off, keys still in the ignition. I thought about calling Allison, telling her I needed space. But I didn't. Instead, I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror and whispered something I hadn't said out loud in months. "What are you actually doing, Mark? Not what are you fixing? Not who are you chasing? Just What are you doing? Because if I wasn't careful, I was about to become the very storm I'd spent months trying to survive. The day we signed the divorce papers felt colder than it should have for early spring. Even the clerk's office carried a hush, like the air had agreed not to interfere. The woman at the counter wore a soft smile, the kind you reserve for people walking into something final. Dana was already there when I arrived, hair down, hands clasped, a look in her eyes I hadn't seen since before we broke. She wore the necklace I'd given her our second anniversary, the one she used to wear without thinking. I sat beside her. Neither of us spoke while we waited. Just two people who used to know every inch of each other's thoughts, now counting the seconds between pen strokes. When the papers were slid across the table, I reached for the pen automatically. My signature spilled out quickly, like muscle memory. But Dana hesitated. She stared at the line with her name above it, eyes locked on the ink like it might blur if she waited long enough. "I don't want to sign this," she said softly. I froze. Her voice didn't crack. There was no breakdown, no tears. Just this small, measured honesty that landed harder than anything loud ever could. "Then why are you here?" I asked, trying not to sound cruel. Dana turned toward me, her face open, too open. "Because I thought you needed me to be. Because I thought maybe if I showed up, you'd see I haven't given up." I blinked. The room felt smaller, hotter. "Dana, I know I ruined things. I know I let myself drift. But you did too," she said. "We both stopped fighting. She swallowed. "I still believe we're worth something. Even now." I looked down at the table. The divorce packet sat between us like a sealed tomb. She reached for my hand, just grazed her fingers across mine. "I miss us, Mark. The version that danced in grocery store aisles. The version that didn't need therapists to translate every sentence. I want to try again. Really try." The weight of her words wasn't lost on me. But before I could respond, I heard the voice I hadn't expected to that day. "Allison." I turned. She was standing just outside the doorway. I hadn't even seen her come in. She wasn't dramatic, didn't raise her voice, just looked at me with the same quiet steadiness that made me trust her from day one. "I came to drop something off for Lydia," she said, nodding toward the hallway. I didn't mean to interrupt. Dana straightened, her hand pulled back. Her expression tightened, but not in anger, in recognition. They hadn't met before, not formally. But somehow, I think they both understood what the other meant to me. Allison turned to leave, then stopped, looked right at me. Her voice was gentle, but absolute. "Mark, I care about you. But I won't be the option you reach for while standing in two places. If you're still deciding, I'm not part of that decision." And just like that, she was gone. Dana sat perfectly still. I turned to her slowly, the silence wrapping around us like threadbare cloth. She whispered, "She's right, isn't she?" I nodded. Because she was. Because I couldn't hold on to one life while trying to borrow comfort from another. I picked up the pen again, steady this time. Signed my name at the bottom of the final page. Dana didn't stop me. She signed hers, too. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were both telling the truth. Not the version that made us feel safe, but the one that finally let us go. I walked out of the clerk's office just as the sky was starting to shift. That in-between light, where night still lingers on the rooftops, but dawn is quietly elbowing its way in. The world was hushed, not empty, just pausing. I clutched the manila envelope they'd given me like it was something fragile. Inside were the final copies, the ink still fresh. Two signatures that once built a life together, now drawing the curtain on it. Dana didn't follow me out. We didn't hug, didn't linger in the parking lot for one last goodbye. We'd already said everything in that silent room. And maybe that was mercy. I got in the car and sat for a while, hands on the wheel, staring at the fog curled along the pavement. The engine ticked gently beneath me. For the first time in a long time, there was no one expecting me to explain where I was going. No one to text. No one to rehearse an excuse for. And the truth? That should have felt like freedom. But it didn't. Not yet. It felt like standing at the edge of a lake before jumping in. Not sure if the water will save you or swallow you whole. I thought of Dana's face as I signed the paper. The hope she didn't bother hiding. The years we'd folded into each other, now filed under dissolution of marriage. I thought of Allison, her calm words like a gate that quietly closed behind her. And I thought of myself. Not the version I presented to the world, but the one who lay awake at night wondering if he'd become invisible in his own life. The one who bent so hard to make things work that he forgot to ask if they still should. I stepped out of the car and started walking. Not toward home, just forward. Each step felt unfamiliar, like I was borrowing someone else's legs. But the air was sharp, and it kept me alert. The street was lined with early risers, dog walkers, joggers, a bakery prepping for the morning rush. And me, a newly divorced man with no plan. No rebound. No rescue fantasy. Just space. I passed a bench near the park and sat down. Watched the horizon bleed soft gold into the dark. And for a flicker of a moment, I didn't feel broken. I felt still. I wasn't healed. I wasn't sure if I'd made the right decision. But I knew one thing with more clarity than I'd known anything in months. Today, I didn't belong to anyone but myself. And maybe that wasn't the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning.